Okay, so now it's time to add that basic summary of the arms and legs to our demo and description or construction figure here. And let's start the same way. So I'm imagining that information here. One thing that I'd be doing when looking at this is trying to, abstract just for those important key areas. So let's say here it's the head of the humerus. Right? So I'm imagining that there or in there. Then shaft of the humerus, and then elbow. And so I can see like a sharper point or line here. That would be my funny bone, that sharp point. And then always wherever there's that group of extensors or that softer area, I imagine as this rounder portion. Let's say I'm unclear on the proportion of the humerus. I would follow this, kind of create a C curve and see if it lines up with my thoracic arch. So pretty close. Now, radius and ulna. So this is what I would look for here. I always like to start with the ulna, if I see it. That's the bigger of the two triangles. And here's a bump that's right next to the pinky. So that's where that would be going. So I'm going to make a big triangle that goes this way, hits that point, and then thumb side, radius. Here, this is pronated, so he could play basketball. And so that goes across. And so this radius has moved over this way. And that's all we would want, right? Because I'm not going to design anything other than a cylinder for now that will summarize that. Double check, curve down, lines up at the top of the hip, so I'm okay. Then I'll leave a placeholder for the hand, and that's it for now. So that's what I'm going to add over here. I'll do the same thing on this side. We're just going to foreshorten or make the design slightly smaller. And then for the legs, in terms of drawing this, I'm going to look for the side plane of the pelvis, great trochanter 2/3 of the way down, femur, knee. So here's the broader bow tie, patella, so you can kind of see there, triangle, tuberosity here, and then tibia higher, fibula lower. That's it. And so now let's just add it to our setup. Head of the humerus. If you want, you could put that shape coming around for the scapula. Let's say that's our scapula coming around. Here's my humerus. Double check if I need to. Where is it ending? And then my X. And I always try to line it up. This is a good line too because it gives you a plane or it hints at a plane for later. And then hand. So I'll just kind of leave as a curve or as a shape now. And then same thing with the leg. 2/3. Design, straight. So you see this stage, it's just getting a little bit darker too. That's always what I do. It depends on how much I'm working in terms of setting up steps, and if it's really challenging and I need a lot of steps to kind of work my way into a drawing, I'll always try to stage the line weight by using a lighter touch or trying to be a little bit more so considerate of things as they build up. And so here's my basic pattern or line. Right? So it doesn't have to be fancy. It's just enough to get the perspective. And so what's new that we haven't really discussed yet is cylinder. And you can use anything you want here. You can use spheres combined with boxes, right? This is your descriptive organic language, and you can use it to design however you want what you see. And again, there's advanced and or simple options. For the ellipses and the cylinders, this is how I'm thinking of it. And pardon me if this is too basic, but for those of you that might be new to it, it's something that might be beneficial. So I make three choices. So let's say there's A, B, and C to a cylinder. And the first is, am I over? Well, let's say A, am I above? Which would look like this. B, am I below? Which looks like this. Um, and then C, what's the degree? Or how much am I above or below? Right, so these are the things that I try to ask myself first. Let's say I'm drawing something that's from above. I can have something look like this, where I'm just slightly above, or like this, or like that. So what's important, I think, about getting the cylinder early on is for each of these, I never change the minor axes, right, which is I'm sorry, for these, I never change the major axes, which is the width across. And that's because this is describing a form that is slightly larger, I would say, than the bone itself, right? So I want to find a volume that's in between bone and contour, so I'm going to build up to the muscle. So all I ever change is the minor axes, right? Just this much, to give me my degree as far as how much I'm over or under. And so if you can do that, then all you ever will have to add is your parallel lines or slightly converging lines if there's a more forced sense of perspective, and then a cap on the other side. And so this is going to move the camera right in space depending on how you want the arm to come towards you or away from you. You don't have to think about the two-dimensional or the tilt of the cylinder because it's already implied in the setup of the bone. Okay, so why don't I do this? Let's get rid of some of this information so that it doesn't overwhelm you. I do have a tendency to note take and write when I'm lecturing. So let's just do a little bit of a cleanup here. And then I'll stack on top some cylinders, right, so that you can see how some of this will look. And then I'm going to just ask myself those same three things: A, B, C, over, under, and then how much. Okay, so let's start with the arm that's on the right. And let's just say I did all my buildup. Now I say this arm is going away from me. So that looks to me more like this one. And it's significant, right? It looks like it's going away at a pretty um, severe angle. So maybe I'm going to choose something like that. This is how I do it. First, right? So I would have very loose or light description of the bones and the landmarks and how things are working. That sets up the tilt. So the two-dimensional angle that that cylinder is traveling at, just like we did tilts for the body. Once I have that, right, it's a useful line because it's a help in setting up an ellipse, right? Because any ellipse or cylinder is going to have to be symmetrical to that tilt. Right? So I use it, in other words, as a way to help manage my poor command of perspective. Once I have that cylinder, the lines on the cylinder have to parallel that tilt. And once I have it, this has to be exactly the same on that side. And that's it. So the danger is if you don't have consistency, it'll look like toothpaste. Right, where you'll have a broad end and then a flat end on the other side. And that's all I do. Right? But I don't want these to be too big because I'm going to add muscle shapes to them, which will take us to contour. I want something that I think is just inside of the contour. That one's maybe even a little bit too big. I'll do the same thing here. It's going away at about the same angle. So I'll put that behind. I'm inside, or I'm below, parallel, and then end. So let's say you're, already past this or comfortable with this. You can also find varied form solutions that might feel or look more like what's there. For example, sometimes I'll use, like if we break this part down, sometimes I'll use an ovoid shape because it's closer in design and in um, quality to the forearm, and then I'll stick a 2x4 in the end. And it does the same thing, right? This still shows perspective, but it's sculpting a more organic look to the perspective so that I have to do less work later in making this feel more natural, right? Whereas with the cylinders, I'd still have a little bit of work to do, of course, softening. So again, just like with the description we had of the scapula earlier in terms of general to specific, don't think of this as a procedure where you have to religiously obey the steps and the forms. It's very open and there's a lot of potential for customizing. Now let's do this arm. We'll pick up the pace a little bit. This is the opposite. This is um, right coming toward me, or let's say above, and I'm going to make it dramatic. Right, so I know I'm going to have a broader ellipse. Whereas my center line, I'm going to use an ellipse and design it to be symmetrical to it. And then here's the parallel lines. So it's 3 steps. 3 things to think about, 3 steps. If I wanted this to change direction, it's pretty easy. Let's say I want it to come up, right? Just redesign or repose your gesture or your landmarks, and then maybe I'm seeing above it here. I know the tilt, so I know how I'm going to stack or create my ellipses. Here's my ellipse. Here's my parallel lines. Here's the other side. Or what if I want it to come straight out? Same thing in terms of gesture, shortening the length to imply a sense of foreshortening, and then maybe a really broad, right, to give that idea of it coming forward, parallel lines, and then cap. And then later I could come in and flatten that out and make it more boxy. So hopefully this is user-friendly enough that you can customize and give some um, control over invention or things that you might want to express in your imagination. Let's do something with the legs. So now we have a complete figure in terms of construction there. So for the legs, one thing that's important for me in terms of design is that I'll put so I already have my tilt. I'm going to put the ellipse just on the outside corner of the box. And one thing I try to do with my cylinders, in addition to just having them be inside of the contour, is I always make them overlap a form, right? So I don't ever really want to have, you know, this and then a leg out there, right? Because that's too much distance to make up. So you can see that also is true with my cylinders here. The end or the beginning overlaps, right, or connects with something. So I do that. And then for the leg, if it's a front view and it's standing, I'm almost always going to favor to show this coming toward me. And this is going to be to help magnify the idea of the asymmetry. Right? So that stacking of 3D form that I've hopefully beat into your heads by now. Right? So this principle, which is the same in terms of thinking the side, right? So we go to our side view, right? That if I'm seeing someone from the front, that there's a curvature of that bone, so it might look like I'm underneath. So I exaggerate that principle for the asymmetry. And then for the lower leg, sometimes I'll just do the opposite. Just slightly shift this cylinder back. And just to give you an idea of, again, customizing this, I think it's good to try to get these shapes to see your perspectives, or I'm sorry, these volumes. But now commonly for me, I won't design one for the lower leg, right? Because it's boxy and rigid and a lot of bone. So sometimes here I just set up the landmarks and design muscle volumes around it. Again, for that same reason that I talked about making the ovoid and the box for the forearm, it's just a way of redesigning these steps so you get a different result that seems comfortable. So here's a little bit more of a challenging one. We have the leg moving away. So I can do the same thing, find my landmarks, give myself the tilts in doing so for those cylinders, getting the idea of where different muscles might attach later. And then when I'm comfortable, I see this moving away. So overlapping the ellipse to the corner of the box and then shifting this way. So trying to keep the lines parallel, and then whatever I've chosen is that ellipse, I cap at the end. Here's another uh, customized quality or step. The one thing that you could use really in the upper arm or in the leg here. Sometimes like here, like I see the knee, and that's a really planar transition. It's also helpful for later stages because I would separate maybe the rectus femoris from the muscles on the inside of the leg, the medialis or the sartorius. So if you're comfortable with cylinders, again, here's another customization. Turn it into a box, right, just by adding that third parallel in there. And so what that does is give you a really nice way to organize and see muscle snapping onto form or plane later. The cylinders are pretty vague, right, in terms of understanding the inside. So now that gives you a nice, right, setup shape. I think, and normally I do the exact same thing in the arm, right? Because I can see how much the humerus here is rotated. So to help me understand that for later, I might also put in a box. And now I would see this is a front, this is the inside, and now I know where my muscles are going to go. Right? Whereas before, cylinders are very vague. I don't know where the front and the back and the side are, but adding this extra line can be valuable because now I have a really clear understanding of that. And it's also how much work do you want to do to set yourself up for later, but here I'm purposely trying to muddy the waters a bit so that you see variation. Now lower leg. So this is going back. So I'm going to think, okay, so cylinders here. This is the direction. I've already laid that in with the gesture and the landmark. And then the ankles ending here. And so two parallel lines, and I'm done. So finally, we've made something that looks like a giant robot, right? Which is a necessary and I think very helpful step to seeing and thinking form, and then to later moving into something that allows for a practical understanding and placement of muscles.